And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. I am not Steve Malzberg. I am Mary Walter, and I am joined in studio by Philip K. Howard. He is the founder and chair of an organization called Common Good. He is also the author of a book many of you may have read called The Death of Common Sense. But his new book that you want to read is The Rule of Nobody. And I think this is for both conservatives and liberals. It really, truly is. This book is for everybody because we should all have common sense. And I have to tell you what happened to common sense. And we were talking out in the green room before, and we were having this conversation. I said, I could talk to you for half an hour about this. Well, let me ask you, when did we lose our way? When did this country lose our founding? You know, our founding fathers gave us a path.
Right.
When did we stray off that path, the path was common sense based?
That's right. It was all about people taking responsibility and being accountable,
right,
whether you're a public official or someone in your private life. And in a free society, people could forge their own way and be accountable for how they do. After the 1960s, we lost faith in each other and ourselves, and we tried to create a legal system that would guarantee against all failure. And that no one would be unfair again. We would have procedures. Rules would be written in such detail that no one could ever make a mistake. They would be told how to do everything in advance. And it got more and more detailed to the point where the Constitution is 10 pages long. The proposed Volcker rule implementing one little part of Dodd-Frank is 980 pages long. And so in a literal sense, we have made common sense illegal. It's illegal.
You're absolutely right. And for those people who are raised with common sense, we look at this and we don't know what the rules are. We can't play by the rules because we don't know them. And I don't know, does anybody know what the rules are?
No, and no one can comply with it. So last year a tree fell in a creek in Franklin Township, New Jersey, caused flooding. The mayor sent in a backhoe to pull it out. And then the lawyer said, oh no, that's a Class C1 creek, whatever that means. And we have to get formal approval to pull the tree out of the creek because it's a natural obstacle and prevent the flooding. It took them 12 days and over $12,000 in legal fees to get approval to do what was completely obvious, which is to pull a tree out of a creek. And I can tell you the same story, but affecting hundreds of billions of dollars, with the President of the United States, who doesn't have the authority to approve rebuilding of infrastructure. I'm not talking about roads through virgin forests, but rebuilding broken down bridges.
95 or something.
Yeah, I mean, it took us barely 10 years to build the interstate highway system. We can't even get approval to fix it in 10 years.
And that costs a lot of money when you wind up with these things. So was this all perpetuated by liberals and lawyers, the two L's?
Well, it's actually perpetuated. Everybody distrusted each other. So liberals wanted as much regulation as possible, so they piled on. Lawyers wanted to have everything go to court if there was a disagreement. So then that breeds a kind of a pattern of defensive everything.
Right.
That's the reason environmental review statements went from what were supposed to be 50 pages to 10,000 pages, because everyone's scared they're going to get sued if they don't overturn every bubble. So they go on forever. But conservatives don't trust people in government, so they also wanted very detailed rules to shackle officials to make sure they couldn't be unfair or heavy-handed. And the result was we have a society increasingly paralyzed where nobody, including people in government, can use their common sense.
Well, look at Congress. Congress does nothing.
Well,
which honestly I think sometimes is good.
Well, sometimes it's good, but the most important priority for America today is for Congress to go back and clean out old law.
Yeah.
The law has piled up like sediment in a harbor. Every single government program is broken. It's broken not because the law was a stupid idea necessarily, but because all life choices have unintended consequences. So you have to adapt and change and fix them. So I'll give you an example. Special ed laws, perfectly good idea. Before we had them, we locked up special needs kids in horrible places like Willowbrook. Special ed law has evolved over the last 40 years, so it now consumes over 25% of the total K-12 budget. There's nothing for gifted children. There's nothing for early education. Is that the right balance?
Right.
No. Nobody's even asking the question.
Because you can't ask the question.
It's
Because
the law.
right, but it's bad. You can't even question that.
Right.
Because, and that's one
Are
thing.
you against special needs children?
Exactly. Why do you hate children? What's wrong with you? One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and we kind of got into this, was the idea of thinking versus feeling. And a lot of our laws seem to be based on what what people feel is right, what makes you feel good. This must be right because it makes me feel good. But that is not necessarily what is the right thing to do. So there's all this gray area now. And so people like you and I like to think I have some common sense, although some people may think differently. But we look at that and go, well, that just doesn't make any sense. But somebody's decided, but it feels like the right thing to do.
Yes, and so there are a couple of dominant feelings. Well, what about that poor person? Let's make an exception. Or let's have a right to sue.
Yes.
What if somebody is really unfair? Therefore, we need a full trial before firing any teacher, even though everybody knows the teacher is a terrible teacher and terrible for the kids. And so you have this kind of what if world in response to any effort to rationalize law and let people make judgments again, like how to run a school or how to balance a budget or any of those things. And that's right. So everybody's, oh my gosh, something might happen, and they feel good because they provided all this law. Meanwhile, the country increasingly is paralyzed.
Right.
I mean, the United States now ranks 20th in the world in ease of starting a business.
Yeah, I believe it. I think it's so sad because my father started his own business in this country. My grandparents came to this country and started their own business. They had to. When they came here, you had to have a sponsor. They had to learn how to speak English, the whole bit, and they started their own business. They were very successful, and that's what the American dream always was. But it seems like like you said, there's no failure. So it's not, well, what if someone comes here and they can't learn how to speak English? They don't have the ability. So for them, we have to make all these exceptions and all these rules. I want to talk to you about something you said. You said rules have replaced leadership, but have we not always been a nation of rules?
Well, it depends on what you mean by rule. The rule of law is incredibly important because it prevents people from cheating you or breaching your contract or stealing, and so. But law is supposed to be a framework that safeguards outer boundaries to prevent people from doing bad things. Have a reasonably safe workplace, that's all fine. But we never had a country in which rules told you how to run a factory or how to run a school. And so now, or how to run a nursing home. You go to a daycare center, there'll be 1,000 rules.
Right.
That'll say things, how many blocks you have to have. It's absurd, it's literally absurd. No one could ever comply with it. So no, we didn't have a country where law replaced freedom. Freedom was supported by a system of law that guarded outer boundaries. And we lost that concept that law was boundaries.
Can we talk about common good a little bit?
Sure.
You are the founder and the chair of an organization called Common Good, and it's basically to bring back common sense in our legal system. And I don't know anybody who would be against that. At least I like to think I don't know anyone who would be against that. But my question to you is, that sounds fantastic, but how do you intend to change? How do you change the culture in DC? How do you do that?
Well, at Common Good, we have very specific proposals. We have a proposal to solve the medical malpractice problem where we waste $100 to $200 billion a year in defensive medicine.
Huge waste.
We're working with both environmental groups and the National Association of Manufacturers right now to redesign the environmental review process, so it'll take 1 year instead of 10 years. We do things like that. So we propose new structures, new authority structures that allow choices to be made that are reliable so we can move forward as a society. But there is someone opposed to everything. The trial lawyers hate our proposal to create special health courts because they make money on the unreliability of the system. You might be liable for $20 million for this baby born with cerebral palsy, even though nothing you did could have caused it. And there are some people who love the power of suing to block infrastructure projects because that's where they get their power. Otherwise, no one elected them, but they want to stop it. So they don't necessarily want a process that actually gives an official the authority to decide when there's enough review instead of having litigation going for a decade.
Yeah, and you bring up tort reform, basically, is what we're
Yeah.
talking about here, especially when medicine is such a hot topic right now. And what a lot of people don't realize is doctors order all these tests and perform all these procedures because they're not practicing medicine in their brains, they're practicing law. And right, they're not practicing medicine.
Right.
They're practicing with a lawyer on their shoulder who's going to sue them down the road if, God forbid, something happens or they miss something. And that's why our medicine is so expensive in this country. But yet you're asking lawyers to regulate themselves. Do you honestly think that's going to happen?
No. So we need a new authority structure, and we've proposed special health courts. And by the way, we have the patient safety community. We have the liberals in healthcare are all in favor of this. Obama was in favor of it. We had a proposal in the Affordable Care Act to do pilot projects, but then Harry Reid is a big proponent of the trial lawyers, and they turned our pilot project proposal into the opposite, where you couldn't do a pilot project if it took away the jury. And what we were saying, no, you need a reliable expert court that doctors and patients alike can trust to sort good care from bad care, not a jury by jury,
Yeah, because as soon as it goes to court, it costs the physicians time, money, and everything else. And how do you think they recoup that? It's a huge, it's a big cycle. Well, Philip, thank you so much for joining us, Philip K. Howard, and I have his book, and I even have one to hold up. They gave me a prop. I'm so excited. He's the author of The Rule of Nobody. This is his book, and I know several people I think I'm going to give this to. And your group is Common Good. People look it up on the internet. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate having you here. So it gives us some hope for the future, for maybe some common sense coming back in. And can people go to your website to find out how they can help and join?
Sure, commongood.org.
Good. Commongood.org. There you have it, commongood.org. And also his other book, The Death of Common Sense, which I think also makes an excellent present for a lot of people, at least some people that I know, and maybe I'll send it to them anonymously because we have an entire generation with no common sense, but that's just because I'm old, right? All right, I'm Mary Walter. We are going to be coming back with more of the Steve Malzberg Show, so you don't want to go away.